Just in time to meet Johnathan Grieve, who is in the studio with me, and he is farming by the light of the moon, as opposed to the owl and the pussycat who danced by the light of the moon. Johnathan, thank you for coming in. Good evening.
That's my pleasure. Good evening.
Well, Johnathan sort of popped by Johannesburg en route from Durban back to Cape Town, so a big thank you for making the effort. I've been telling the listeners ever since I had lunch with you about your amazing wine and your fabulous farm, just for their sort of know-how. Where is Avondale?
Avondale's in Paarl, just outside Paarl. We're situated against the Klein Drakenstein mountain, and we look back towards Cape Town, and we can actually see Table Mountain.
Oh, can you? Can you see the mountain?
Yes, yeah, from the cellar door.
Gosh, that must be quite special. Well, you and I could speak for hours and hours. We've got a very short space of time this evening in which to try and convey this powerful message that you are sending out to the world about your wine. You really are farming in a completely different way, aren't you? It's biodynamic farming?
Yeah, we call it biologic. Biologic is a combination of a couple of things. It's got three pillars, basically organic, biodynamic, and modern science, in a holistic approach towards agriculture.
Okay. And what is the actual definition of biodynamic and biologic? Because biologic farming is quite different. It's
biologic is really what we came up with, and it's combining those three disciplines together. But biodynamics is really, it's almost like organics on steroids. It's about getting the energies and your planetary influences on agriculture and your whole cycle of the universe, making use of that in agriculture.
And your whole thrust is cyclical, isn't it? Even your labels come down to cyclists and cyclists. It's sort of a wheel of life, and it's getting your soils back into their natural balance. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, the whole thing about farming and all life, for that matter, is cyclical. You go from, I mean, if you think back to Hindu religions and Buddhist religions and so on, that whole karma and cyclical rebirth and so on. And everything for us is situated or started in the soil and really building that soil. But we farm according to the different lunar influences, the planetary influences, and trying to close the circle and really even right down to our wastewaters and things like that to really get us self-sustainable.
Well, I think, I've gone down on record as saying that the wine industry is one of the few industries where they really have not tried, I don't think. I used to be involved in a partnership where we had a mealie farm in the Western Transvaal. And we had to leave the soils fallow for 1 or 2 years every now and again and get them back to their natural state before you could replant the mealies. That doesn't happen with wine farming. So I've always said that possibly the soils have been a little bit over-farmed and a little bit too fed on chemical feeds in order to be producing, because there's a big question mark as to why South Africa is taking so long to get up to speed with the standard of the rest of the world enologically. What are you doing with your soils to get them back to their natural state?
Well, we started this whole process back in 2000, and Avondale was a chemically run and farmed farm for many years.
As are most of them.
As are most farms. And we approached it and realized, I started in 99, and we approached it and realized that the chemical way of farming wasn't working. So we went and we looked at it, and I started experimenting with different things, and everything starts in the soil. So the first thing that we did was actually cut out the chemical inputs, so all your fertilizers and your herbicides and insecticides and all of that. And then we do a very extensive soil balancing. So I have a very close consultant that I work with and friend who said to me once, you have to earn the right to farm naturally. And the right is earned via stocking your pantry, and your pantry is the soil. So you're looking at broad spectrum nutrition. And as soon as you get broad spectrum nutrition, you get the health in the vineyard, you get your soil life working properly and back, and all the natural systems working like it should be working.
Now, onto the sort of cycles of the moon, which fascinates me. I adore the moon. I'm sure I'm governed by the moon. I'm sure I'm a white witch. But how does the cycle of the moon affect the vine to start with? And then obviously, because you obviously do certain things at certain times of the month, both in the vineyard and in the winery, and then obviously you have had me totally fascinated about root days and leaf days and stem days, which we'll tell the listeners about quickly if we've got some time.
Okay, well, just quickly, the biodynamics, there's a planting calendar that was developed by a woman in Germany in the 50s, and she's actually recently passed away. She did the main work on it, and her name was Maria Thun. And she basically worked out that there's certain, according to the constellations, she divided that into 4 different groupings, and basically your root, your flower, your leaf, and your fruit days. And through a month, 27 and a half days or thereabouts, you go through the cycle every month.
Yes.
And that biodynamics is farming according to that. So from when you plant carrots, which are roots, and when you plant and when you harvest them, and when you prefer to till your vineyards or your orchards or whatever you're doing, all the way down in viticulture, it's when we're wanting to plant the cover crops, when we're wanting to spray natural foliar nutrition, when we're wanting to harvest the grapes, even down to when we're making the wine, when we prefer to rack the wines and blending.
What is the effect of the moon on that plant? So say I want to plant a cover crop in the vineyard. When is the best time during the phases of the moon to plant a cover crop, and why?
Well, it all depends what plant you're planting, and it's not necessarily just about the moon. We talk about the moon because we have a wine called La Luna, but it's actually the broader planetary influence, so the zodiac as a whole, not just the moon.
Okay.
The moon has obviously direct influences, and because we can see the moon, that's something that we can relate to. But for an example, your cover crops are depending what type of cover crops, but certain ones are more legume cover crops, and that one you want to plant at a more rooting type of cycle. But it's also down to the moon influence, down to foliar nutrition. And foliar nutrition hugely is influenced by the moon, and the same way that the sea is influenced by the moon. And at springtide, you have the biggest flow of fluctuation of water. It's the same as you and I and plants. We have the biggest fluctuation, and specifically vineyards, has a huge fluctuation at full moon from the leaf down into the root during the nighttime
so it's
and back
going to
again.
draw lots more water out of the ground at full moon or
No,
whatever.
more specifically, we apply the foliar nutritions at full moon because you have the best uptake of the foliar nutrition.
Right.
It's quite simple.
Okay, well that's clever. That sort of explains it nice and simply. And you did do a tasting, didn't you, recently that you sort of concluded in May sometime, and what were the results of that?
Well, it was incredible because we've been working according to this lunar calendar and the actual biodynamic planting calendar, and it also has an influence on wines. As it has an influence on everything. And we decided to take this and take it to a whole lot of cynical wine journalists
like
and
me.
like you, and take it and expose it. And we did 4 tastings over 4 different days. We kept it completely blind. We had a panel of 8 people, and we tasted a range of 6 Avondale wines. And on each day we kept it the days away from them. And it was just incredible. Firstly, the most prominent thing was that there was consensus between everybody. And now getting 6 or 8 journalists together and getting consensus is one amazing thing. But there was no descending tone. Every day had a specific character that it was showing. And every day, and definitely at the end we got together and we said, okay, which are the days? And the first day we tasted on was a fruiting day, and it showed exceptional amount of fruit, almost overpoweringly so. The second day was a leaf day, and that had a lot of secondary and tertiary sort of flavor spectrums, a lot more minerality coming through. The third day was a root day, which was quite flat. It was the wines were definitely not showing themselves. And then the fourth day was a flower day, which was probably the best of the lot.
The prettiest day of all. Yeah.
It just had the fruit and the minerality.
It's just amazing. I wish that I had like an hour to speak to you. And in fact, I had a song to play out with, but I think I might not play out with my song so that I've got a little bit more time to talk to you. Because it seems such a shame to cut you off in mid-flow here, just where we're getting excited about it all. Do you think that could change the way people taste internationally on panels and things? Because, I do a lot of competition tasting and judging. And I often get flack from wine farmers to say, how can it possibly be that my Canonco Pinotage got 5 stars in John Platter, and it got 2.5 stars at the Old Mutual Trophy Show, and it got 1 star at Decanter? Possibly this is the reason. Maybe we're tasting the wine on the incorrect day.
Well, there's no doubt that it has an influence on it. And some of the days, basically 3 of the days, which are good days to taste on, and they show different aspects of the wines, but they nonetheless really show well. Whereas the root day is a day that you don't want to have a
Sounds
tasting
like a dead, boring sort of rooty day.
It really is not for tasting wine. It's not a good idea.
For our our man-in-the-street purposes, if I want to enjoy wine at its optimum, according to Johnathan Grieve's La Luna, which is the best day of the month to taste wine?
Well, there's a cyclical. It is a cycle like we were talking about earlier. So it goes through different days, and if you want to find out about them,
is it a given? I mean, if you have a website, I could go onto the Avondale website,
yes,
and it would say next week you've got a root day on Tuesday, a flower day on Wednesday, and I could take
no,
it from
100%. There's you can find the calendar on my blog, which is www.biologicwine.co.za, and there's the next 4 days that are coming, and then if you click into it, you can get the next 2 months. The different days on each day of the month.
Well, I can see that I've got a whole lot of businessmen out there who are listening to my show thinking there's a business here in the making. I'm going to start producing these, and I'm going to send them to Robert Parker and Jancis Robinson, and we're going to change the way the whole tasting industry thinks, because it really could be quite a valid point, I think.
And the other side of it is it affects all wines, not just natural wines like us. It's all wines. I mean, wine is a natural product at the end of the day. Obviously, wines that are produced biodynamically have so much more character and so much more expression of where they come from.
And
so
I assume it would be
the
same with a potato or a broccoli or a mealie. Everything would taste better if we tasted by the light of the moon.
Sure. But you know, the biggest thing about this and why we did this experiment with the journalist was really to highlight the fact that biodynamics has a huge role to play. I mean, if it affects a wine like it has, and it does, surely it has to affect how we produce it, full stop. I mean, it's almost conclusive evidence for the people who are involved. And more importantly, it's just such it's bringing you back to the romanticism of wine.
I love that.
And really experimenting. You know, there's no wrong or right. Which day do you like or which day is the best?
Yes.
It's what you think about it.
Yes. Well, it's a very interesting exercise. I strongly advise all of you who are interested to jump onto that website,
www.biologicwine.co.za.
Well, I think we should do that. I have got a glass of Jonathan's La Luna in front of me. Tell the listeners quickly what's in that wine.
Okay, the La Luna is a 2006 vintage. It's a Bordeaux blend, so we have Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, and Petit Verdot. It's made naturally. Obviously, we add nothing other than a little bit of sulfur, very low sulfur content, and fermented naturally, aged in French oak barrels for between 12 and 18 months. And it's just a real classic, elegant, old world style wine.
It's completely and utterly delicious. I can highly recommend it. Johnathan, thank you for coming by via Johannesburg en route home. It was brilliant having you, and I really do think we need to spend a lot more time chatting about your farming. It's innovative and it's working.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
I think that's all. I know that's all I have time for. I was going to play you the song To the Moon by Dvorak, but we've long passed that, and Titus is staring at me. So from me, Carrie Adams, I hope you enjoyed my green show. Have a fabulous weekend. Lots of sport to watch, lots of wines to drink while you watch it. And until next week, goodbye.
People of Note is a program in which we explore the lives and musical choices of well-known characters in South Africa who've done something special with their lives and also love music. They'll talk about themselves and the music that they've chosen. So do join me, Richard Cock, as we meet People of Note every Sunday from 6 to 9 p.m.